Victoria Pebbles, the Program Director of the Great Lakes Commission. Good to see you.
Thanks for having me.
It's been a good conference so far.
Excellent.
Excellent, it has. Now there are so many different things we could talk with you about, but we wanted to focus on the idea of wind and the lake. What are we doing offshore right now? What can we do? And you say there are obstacles as to why we don't see these wonderful wind farms that we've literally been talking about for years now.
Well, that's right. There are no projects, no wind farms in the Great Lakes. There are a number of installed wind farms on the land around the Great Lakes, but wind in the lakes is facing several obstacles. Pretty basically, they're financial, they're technical, and they're regulatory. On the financial side, it's really lining up the financing that the developers need to ensure that they can get the funding for these projects.
Are they afraid they won't see return on their money, or when you say they're having difficulty, how so?
Well, mostly what I've heard from them is it has to do with getting what's called a power purchase agreement. You need someone who will actually say that they're going to buy your power before you build it. If you have an agreement that says, I'm going to buy your power, then they can go to the bank or other financing entities and get the funding because they have assurance they'll be able to sell that power and recoup those funds.
Money seems to be something we can get through at some point. People will say there's profit to be made, let me invest. Regulation seems to be a bigger nut to crack.
Well, I think it depends on who you talk to. Some people will say it's the financing, but the regulatory issue is nothing to laugh at. There are significant difficulties there too. One of the unique aspects of the Great Lakes is that the lake themselves, the bottom lands of them where the turbines would be placed based on current technology, which requires a sort of foundation.
Right.
There are floating turbines other places, but that land is owned by the states themselves. So unlike what we hear about in the marine coasts, where the federal government owns and leases lands like for offshore oil drill and rigs in, say, the Gulf, for example, you have the states that own these bottom lands, and they don't currently have specific rules and regulations set up for turbines. They have programs for leasing the bottom lands and permitting for things like breakwaters and piers and navigational structures, but they were not really designed for turbines.
I imagine the difficulty for the companies that want to build comes because we have so many states. Michigan has one rule, but New York may have a different rule. Pennsylvania may have something separate. Is there a way that we can think about making one ruling that all the states could find a way to compromise?
Well, I'm not sure that the states would really like that. The states, I don't see that that would necessarily be that is necessarily an obstacle, because a wind farm would probably be in a single state's waters, where the multi-state issue comes in with transmission lines. So you might need cabling or other support structures, or even the barges or other navigation vessels that would be needed to support the maintenance and the operation of those that might need to traverse different state waters. But it's probably not likely you would see a farm that would cross two state boundaries out in the water.
Another big issue, though, when it comes state to state, is people saying, well, I don't really want that in my backyard. I don't want it right offshore where I can see it. We've seen that happen in Michigan. We've seen that happen here in Ohio.
Yeah, so the Michigan and Ohio examples are very interesting. I think sometimes decisions are made before there's the full breadth of information about wind farms. Most of the dialogue that I've been involved with recently has been around wind farms being placed pretty far out, several miles at minimum, where the visual impact would be very little, and in some cases it wouldn't even be visible to the naked eye on, say, a cloudy or a foggy day. But that's not to say that people don't have concerns. People have feelings about their landscape and their views. So those are not to be minimized, those public perception issues. I think a challenge is getting information to them about what are the trade-offs. With any energy source, you're going to have decisions, you have trade-offs. At present, in most municipal and urbanized areas in the southern lakes, you go along the shore and you see very large structures, coal-fired plants, nuclear facilities. We're just not used to the idea of turbines near our waters.
And this would be rather alongside the shore. This would be actually out in the water. So
yeah,
some
no
people
one's
have
talking about
an
anything
issue.
really close to the shore.
Right. The third part, you said financing, regulatory. The third part of this is technological. Are we ready if someone were to come along right now and say, let's go? Do we have the technology?
If we had the financing and the regulatory obstacles overcome, the one major technical issue is to deal with ice, which sets our region apart from some of the installed projects that you see in Europe. And we have these unique icing issues. We haven't fully cracked that nut yet, but I'm very confident that we can and we will. We have a number of research institutions around the Great Lakes that are looking at this issue. I have great confidence in our really intelligent engineers and research institutes that we can figure this problem out.
If you had a magic wand right now, you could wave it and suddenly it's 5 years in the future and things have gone according to the plans you'd like to see. What would we have on the Great Lakes?
I think we'd have a demonstration project. We'd have a small scale project that we could look at and learn from and say, what are we doing right? What are we doing wrong? We would design it smartly to deal with the regulatory issues, the bird and bat issues, looking at how it's impacting, heavily monitoring it to see how it really does impact some of those resources in and around the lakes that we're concerned about. We'd also be monitoring the return on investment, the reliability, and the jobs and economic development impact that it might bring.
Perception being a big part of it, though, you think if we got people and the public behind it, that would smooth the way?
I definitely think so. I think some of the examples we've seen where there's been backlash have been where there hasn't been adequate processes set up for the public to be involved in that discussion. You see, for example, a project that's been slowly gaining momentum around the Cleveland area demonstration project. That's more of a homegrown project. They've done a lot of homework reaching out to local communities. They're local developers, local interests, as opposed to, say, the project that we heard about, sort of the poster child about how not to do it offshore of West Michigan, where a foreign entity came in and didn't have that engaged process set up in advance and didn't do the necessary homework, quite frankly. And I think having it be homegrown helps to understand that this is an idea that was generated locally. The benefits will happen locally.
Each project learning from the one ahead.
Yes.
Victoria Pebbles, Great Lakes Commission, thank you so much for your time today.
Thanks so much for